For decades, James Garner and Clint Walker were seen as towering symbols of classic Hollywood masculinity, strong, stoic, and larger than life. Both men built legendary careers, earned loyal fans, and defined an era of television and film that will never be repeated. Yet, behind the tough exteriors and public admiration, there was a story James Garner kept to himself for years. Now, after a lifetime of silence, he finally reveals the truth about Clint Walker, and it's far more complicated than anyone expected. Their paths crossed at a time when Hollywood rewarded strength but punished vulnerability. To the public, Walker was the unshakable giant, while Garner embodied effortless charm and wit. But off-camera, the dynamic between them carried tension, respect, misunderstanding, and unspoken emotion that never made headlines. Garner's revelations pull back the curtain on a relationship shaped by pride, competition, and the quiet pressure of living up to an image no man could fully escape. This isn't a story of scandal or betrayal. It's a story of restraint, of words not said, moments misunderstood, and truths buried beneath professionalism. Garner reflects on how fame, ego, and the expectations of an unforgiving industry created distance where connection might have existed. What he finally admits changes how we see both men, not as legends, but as human beings navigating loyalty, silence, and regret in an era that never allowed them to speak freely. James Garner spent most of his life mastering the art of restraint. On screen, he played men who spoke with their eyes as much as their words, quietly confident, emotionally guarded, and effortlessly strong. Off-screen, that restraint followed him everywhere, especially when it came to Clint Walker. For years, Garner chose silence, not because there was nothing to say, but because saying it would have meant confronting a truth Hollywood never encouraged men like them to admit. When Garner and Walker first crossed paths, the contrast was impossible to ignore. Clint Walker was physically imposing, almost mythic in stature, the embodiment of raw Western masculinity. James Garner, by comparison, carried a different kind of strength, subtle, sharp, and grounded in intelligence rather than size. Yet beneath those differences was a shared understanding of the unspoken rules of their era. Don't complain, don't show weakness, and never let the public see cracks in the image. In the beginning, there was respect. Garner admired Walker's discipline and presence, the way he commanded a room without raising his voice. Walker, in turn, recognized Garner's rare authenticity, his refusal to overact or posture for approval. But admiration in Hollywood often walks hand in hand with tension. As their careers rose, so did comparison. Studio executives, reporters, and fans constantly measured one man against another, turning quiet rivalry into something neither of them openly acknowledged. Garner recalls moments where conversations felt unfinished, where words hovered but were never spoken. In an industry driven by perception, even the smallest misunderstandings could harden into distance. Walker's reserved nature was often mistaken for coldness. Garner's independence was sometimes misread as defiance. Neither man corrected those assumptions. Silence was easier. Silence was safer. What Garner admits now is that silence came at a cost. The era they lived in did not reward emotional honesty, especially among men who symbolized strength. Any attempt at vulnerability risked being weaponized, turned into weakness by studios eager to maintain illusions. So both men stayed within the boundaries set for them. Even when those boundaries felt suffocating, there were moments when Garner sensed Walker wanted to say more about the pressure of fame, the isolation, the physical toll of embodying strength year after year. But those moments passed. A joke replaced honesty. A handshake replaced conversation. And time, relentless and indifferent, kept moving forward. Looking back, Garner recognizes that what stood between them was not hostility, but timing and conditioning. They were products of a system that valued endurance over expression, strength over self-awareness, loyalty to image over truth. In that system, connection often became collateral damage. Isn't about conflict, it's about proximity without closeness. Two men standing near each other, bound by shared experience, yet separated by everything they were taught not to say. Garner's silence was never indifference. It was survival. And only now, with distance and reflection, can he see how much remained unspoken between him and Clint Walker. This was the foundation of a relationship defined less by action and more by restraint, a quiet, unresolved story that would linger long after the cameras stopped rolling. As the years passed, the distance between James Garner and Clint Walker did not widen dramatically, it simply settled in, becoming part of the landscape of their lives. There were no explosive arguments or public disagreements, just an ongoing quiet that neither man seemed able to break. Hollywood had trained them well, professionalism first, personal truth second. And so they worked, smiled, and moved through the same world while rarely stepping into each other's inner one. Garner noticed how Walker carried himself with increasing caution. The physical demands of his roles weighed heavily, though Walker rarely acknowledged it aloud. Injuries were endured in silence. Exhaustion was masked by discipline. Garner recognized the signs because he felt them too, just expressed differently. Both men were aging in an industry that celebrated youth while demanding invincibility from its stars. Admitting strain felt like surrender. In private moments, Garner began to question whether his own silence contributed to the growing emotional gap. He wondered if a single honest conversation might have changed everything. But those thoughts always arrived too late after an event, after a missed opportunity, after another year had passed without meaningful exchange. Pride, reinforced by decades of cultural expectation, kept both men guarded. Public perception continued to complicate matters. Fans and media painted Walker as distant and Garner as rebellious, narratives that never fully captured the truth of either man. These simplified images made real connection harder, trapping them in roles that extended beyond the screen. When people believe they know you, correcting them can feel pointless. Garner also reflects on moments of unspoken loyalty. Though they rarely voiced it, there was an underlying respect between them. When Walker faced contractual battles and industry pressure, Garner understood his resolve. When Garner challenged studio authority and fought for fair treatment, Walker recognized the courage it took. Neither said it out loud, but both noticed. What hurt most, Garner admits, was the realization that shared struggle does not guarantee shared intimacy. They endured the same system, the same pressures, and the same expectations, yet walked parallel paths rather than intersecting ones. Hollywood encouraged competition, not communion. And men like them were taught that emotional self-sufficiency was a virtue. Even when it bred isolation. As time passed, reconnecting felt increasingly unnatural. Reaching out required vulnerability, and vulnerability had never been part of their shared language. Each assumed the other preferred distance. Each waited. And in that waiting, years disappeared. Garner's reflections in this are not confessions of regret, but acknowledgments of consequence. Silence does not always protect, it can also prevent understanding. What once felt like strength now appears in hindsight, as missed opportunity. Reveals a relationship defined by mutual respect overshadowed by emotional restraint. It is the story of two men shaped by an era that prized endurance over expression, leaving little room for the kind of honesty that builds a lasting connection. Their story was never about conflict. It was about the quiet cost of never stepping beyond the roles assigned to them and the realization that some truths, once delayed too long, can never fully be spoken. In the final years of his life, James Garner came to understand that truth does not always arrive as revelation. Sometimes it arrives as acceptance. When he finally reflected openly on Clint Walker, there was no anger left to release, no resentment waiting to be aired. What remained was clarity clearer than anything silence had ever offered. He saw their relationship for what it truly was, not broken, not hostile, but unfinished. Garner recognized that the world expected drama where there had only been restraint. Fans wanted stories of rivalry or reconciliation, but neither fit the reality. What defined his connection with Walker was respect held at a distance, shaped by an era that demanded emotional control and discouraged introspection. They were men built to endure, not to explain themselves. And they lived accordingly. With time, Garner forgave both of them, not for wrongdoing, but for limitation. They did what they knew how to do with the tools they were given. Walker's quiet withdrawal from Hollywood was no longer seen as avoidance, but as preservation. Garner's own insistence on independence was no longer framed as pride, but as survival in an industry that punished vulnerability. What stings most in hindsight is not the absence of reconciliation, but the absence of acknowledgement. A simple recognition of shared struggle might have bridged the silence. But that moment never came. And Garner accepts that some connections are not meant to evolve beyond their original shape. They exist as they are, complete in their incompleteness. This final is not a confession, it is a release. Garner no longer carries the weight of what might have been. He honors what was real: professionalism, mutual respect, and an unspoken understanding forged through years of shared pressure. Those things mattered, even if they were never verbalized at the end. Garner's truth is not about Clint Walker alone. It is about a generation of men taught to equate strength with silence and the emotional cost that followed. His words serve not as accusation, but as reflection and invitation to see these icons not as myths, but as human beings navigating expectations they never asked for. The silence between James Garner and Clint Walker was not emptiness. It was filled with things never said, feelings never named, and respect never questioned. And in finally acknowledging that, Garner found peace.